We're going to go to the 23rd Psalm in the New Living Translation, Psalm 23, and we're going to go to verse 4 today in 23rd Psalm, and it's right here. Once you get it, just give me an old-fashioned amen. And it reads just like this from the New Living Translation, Psalm 23, verse 4, and it says, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me." For the sake of preaching, I want to read it to you one more time. Psalm 23, verse number 4 says this: "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid." And it's probably more traditionally known to you: "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil." Thank God for the reading of the word of God for the people of God. You can have your seats. Have your seats. I want to speak to you for the next few moments using as a subject, I ain't never scared. I ain't never scared. Some of you will be able to catch this and roll along with me, but in the metro Atlanta area, in the early 2000s, was a brother, 6'1", 6'2"-ish, 361 pounds. His birth name is Wayne Harnett Jr., but his stage name is Bone Crusher. Bone Crusher, 6'2", Melody, 361 pounds. In the spring of 2003, I shall never forget. I'm a freshman in college, my sophomore year of college, Minister Cowan, and Bone Crusher, Wayne Harnett Jr., releases a track. In fact, it was released on April the 8th, 2003, a song that was entitled, "I Ain't Never Scared." And family, this rapper and producer and actor and even activist, Wayne Harnett Jr., known as Bone Crusher, releases this song in the spring of 2003, "I Ain't Never Scared." And at the time, I think, being a freshman from Georgia, living and going to school in Alabama, with Georgia Boy tattooed on my right forearm, that I have to make sure that every time this song comes on, that I represent the state that I came from. See, some of you gonna look at me as if in 03 you were not in the same state of mind as I was in. And although this song, "I Ain't Never Scared," only made it to 26 on the top 100 Billboard charts, it was number 1 on the playlist for most DJs. And every time you walked in, if you heard Bone Crusher and T.I. and the other rappers that were suggested on the track, when you heard them say this part, "When I pull up to the club." Okay, yeah. And at the time in my life, the lyrics "I Ain't Never Scared" suggested to a young boy who was undersized on a Division I football team that felt as if he had to always flex a muscle and prove himself. Every time the song came on, you can find me shirt off in the middle of the crowd yelling, "I ain't never scared." And family, in the moment, as I reflect back now, my thought process was that, Keegan, I had to prove to everybody from Alabama that when a little Georgia boy comes in the club, it does not matter what you say, how big you are, how much you got, I'm going to let you know I ain't never scared. And family, before we move too quickly, that was the mindset I had in the club. And the question that I had to ask myself this week, how can you, all 5'9", 10" of you, walk inside a club with people 6 foot and more, people that really have thuggish resumes, people that don't have as much to live for as you do, people with track records of hurting people? How can you stand in the middle of a club in a state where you have no family members, you don't have any friends, you're the only one from your school that goes there? How do you have so much confidence to stand in the middle of a club and shout, I ain't never scared? But family, what blew my mind is I had all that confidence then, but now when a small trial comes in my life or a small hiccup or hang up, now doubt kicks in and fear kicks in. And my question for all of us in the room, how in the world did we live our lives on the worldly side and nothing fazed you? You can drink all night, didn't get bothered about mixing brown or white. You can smoke and do all the things you did. You can run around, but every time you woke up, every time you faced somebody bigger, smarter than you, you had the confidence to say, I ain't never scared. But when we come over on the Lord's side, how in the world do we lose our confidence in being scared and fearful of what the enemy can do to you? But I've come to learn, family, that no weapon formed against me shall be able to prosper. That if God be for me, nobody can be against me. So no matter what I face, no matter who comes up against me, no matter how strong the enemy seems to be, I ain't never scared. Here it is, family. Quickly, I want to walk through this thing real quick. As most of you know, previously this month, we've mentioned in our series 23, which is hosted by the 23rd Psalm, we've talked about this particular infamous and most famous psalm and how the biblical context, Velvet, and the background of it gives us a couple different perspectives. We've talked about that some suggest that the perspective of this writer, David, is divided. Some suggest that David writes from a place of being a young, poor shepherd boy who's been born in an unfortunate situation and has been, because of the unfortunate situation, outcast and marginalized by, like many of us, by his family. So now David is on the outside looking in, working in the field. But others suggest that David is writing the 23rd Psalm from the pinnacle of success because he's now the king of all of Israel. But what we discover is that regardless of which perspective that David is writing this psalm from, it has the same goal. So regardless of the fact if David is writing this perspective as a young, poor shepherd boy that's working in the field while his brothers are chilling on the inside, working in the air conditioning, or if he's writing from the pinnacle of success as the king of Israel, that despite the fact that there are different perspectives, the goal is still the same. And family, that helps me to understand that sometimes in life will offer you different perspectives, but the goal is the same. What do you mean, Cray? I've learned that just because there is a disagreement does not mean there has to be disconnection. Just because you don't see eye to eye with somebody, just because y'all don't have similar backgrounds, just because you come from different generations, just because there's a disagreement does not mean that that's the end of the world. In fact, if y'all will be honest like me, some of my best friendships and connections are with people that have different perspectives than what I have. And what you will learn about life is that sometimes life will put you in an uncomfortable room with a bunch of different perspectives, and what we have to learn is that despite the fact that the perspective is different, we just need to make sure that the goal is the same. Because a disagreement is not the end of the world. We should not be divided because of different perspectives. And that's why, family, I'm cool with Kanye West having an album called Jesus is King. Because even though we may look through different lenses or maybe we have different perspectives, the goal is the same: to lift up the name of Jesus until somebody's soul gets changed. So I'm not tripping like most of the Christian believers about an album that's titled Jesus is King, because our perspectives may be different, but the goal is the same. We don't know which perspective David is writing from, so scholars have given us multiple. And despite the fact of the multiple perspectives, we have learned that just because the perspective is different does not mean the goal is different. Regardless of what perspective it is that David is writing from, again, whether he's writing from the perspective of a poor shepherd boy in the field, or if he's writing from the pinnacle of success as the king of Israel, when we look at Psalm 23, this infamous, famous psalm, when we look at it and it gets to verse 4, it seems like, Amy, David is in a different place. Because when the psalm opens up, you find David speaking motivationally. He's talking about light and life. David says that the Lord is my shepherd, the New Living Translation. I have all that I need. He makes me rest in green pastures. He leads me beside peaceful streams. When it opens up, David is writing motivationally. He's writing about light and life. But as soon as we hit verse number 4, David seems to start writing about darkness and death. He says in one translation, even when, not if, but when I walk through the darkest valleys. And then he says in another translation, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. How, David, do you go from verse 1, 2, and 3, talking about light and life, to verse 4, highlighting death and darkness? Because the reality is, family, that's how life is. And if some of us will be honest in a moment, you can remember when you were 16 years old, you had dreams to do great things. Your life was going to look so differently. But by the time you hit 36 and older, you look back at some things and you see that it seems as if you had a verse 1, 2, and 3 moment of light and life, and then you have a verse 4 moment. Do I got any people in here right now that'll be honest with me and yourselves and say, listen, Monday was verse 1, 2, and 3. Everything was light and life. But by Tuesday, it was verse number 4, darkness and death. Every now and again, life will offer you some highs, and then life will offer you some lows. You can be wealthy on this day and broke tomorrow. You can have food in your refrigerator on today and have none by tomorrow. Sometimes life will offer you, family, verse 1, 2, and 3, but it definitely has moments of verse number 4. Y'all gonna miss it because we miss what we say about David. We call David the man after God's own heart. We lead the lineage of Jesus all the way back to David. Even the man after God's own heart, even the one that Jesus' lineage comes from, has a dark day. So what makes us think that living in our lives every single day that you will not have a verse number 4 moment in your life? Here's what's interesting. But he closes the end of verse 4 by saying, even when I walk through the darkest valleys, I will not be afraid. Another translation says, I shall not fear any evil. And family, this is interesting to me because it almost feels as if David is trying to convince himself. It almost sounds to me like David is trying to make sure he understands that no matter what I'm facing, I ain't never scared. It feels in this moment that David is trying to convince himself. Why, Cray? Because we have to understand David is not writing the Bible. We just read it as the Bible. But David is writing about what he's experiencing and feeling in that moment. So it feels to me that David is trying to convince himself that no matter what I'm facing, I ain't never scared. And family, sometimes, oftentimes, life, all of us will have a moment in life where you got to sit yourself down and convince yourself that no matter what I'm facing in this life, I ain't never scared. There will come a time, if it has not happened for you yet, that you got to sit down in your bathroom all by yourself, lock the door, don't answer nobody, no cell phone, no electronics, maybe even switch the light off and have a conversation and encourage yourself. There will be times in life when you got to tell yourself, I may be broke, but I ain't never scared. They may have walked out of my life and left me. I may have lost them, but I ain't never scared. I may not have everything I desire, but guess what? I ain't never scared. I may have to go through trials and tribulations. I ain't never scared. There will come a time, family, in all of our lives where you got to sit yourself down and convince yourself that I ain't never scared. Okay. Y'all, this ain't resonating with you. David seems to be as if he's trying to convince David that no matter what I'm facing or what I'm in, I ain't never scared. I shall never forget that that I had, Shavante, a great fear of elevators. I'm going back to the time I can remember I was afraid of elevators. Miss Joanne, I didn't care how many flights of stairs it was. I was not getting on an elevator. We played a bowl game, Troy versus Northern Illinois. We played in San Jose, California. First time I ever stayed at a Hilton hotel. Thought it was something there. They had me on the 8th floor. And on the 7th floor, you had to get off the elevator, climb outside over a balcony to take the other stairs to the 8th. And for a whole week in San Jose, California, I took 7 flights of stairs, climbed outside over a balcony with my football bag on my back, climbed the last flight of stairs because I refused to take an elevator. Shortly after, 2009, I'm working at Troy University. I'm a mail carrier. I deliver mail in every single building on campus. And for 2 years on that job, Mayan, I climbed every flight of stairs Monday through Friday to deliver mail. But one day, I told myself that morning, I'm going to ride the newest elevator on campus. I go, pick up the mail from the post office, Dion, bring it back down on campus, have to sort the mail. You know how it is, got to sort all the mail. Once I get it sorted, I put all the mail buckets in the back of the mail van. I go to my third stop, Jack Hawkins Jr. Education Building, the newest elevator on campus. I got my cell phone in my pocket for security in case the elevator decides to get stuck. I walk inside, look at the elevator button, I smash it with confidence. I step inside the elevator, cell phone in my pocket, mail bucket in my hand. I got confidence, and as the door was closing, I jumped out. 2 or 3 different times, I stepped in the elevator with confidence, but I jumped out in fear. I stepped in the elevator with confidence, and I jumped out with fear. Well, the last time, I looked at the arrow that pointed up, and I punched the arrow that was going up. I grabbed the bucket, I put my cell phone in my pocket, I closed my eyes, and as it was going up, I just kept telling myself, I ain't scared, I ain't scared, I ain't scared, I ain't scared. And before I knew it, it opened to the 3rd floor. And since that day, I still ride elevators now. And what am I saying to some of us in the room right now? There will be elevator-like moments in your life. Whatever it is that you are afraid of, sometimes you got to clutch yourself, close your eyes, and just say, I ain't scared, I ain't scared, I ain't scared, I ain't never scared, I ain't never scared. I don't care how bad it looks, I ain't scared. I don't care how dark it gets, I ain't scared. I don't care what I'm in, I ain't scared. Sometimes you got to convince yourself that no matter what the devil throws at you, I ain't never scared. I believe, family, that David is trying to convince himself, Miss Angela, that no matter what I'm in right now, I ain't never scared. David, family, has a shift to talking about darkness and death, but he ends it by saying, I will not be afraid and I shall not fear any evil. And family, I now understand that why David has so much confidence in declaring that whatever he's found himself in, he ain't scared. Number one, David can have confidence like this because David understands that God is close by. The verse says, he says, though I walk through even when I walk through the darkest valley, I am not afraid. Watch this, because God is right beside me. Here it is, family. David is saying that the first reason I don't have to be afraid in moments of darkness is because I know that God is right beside me. It's Halloween season. Have you ever been in a haunted house, a haunted field? Have you ever been in a dark room that you were not familiar with? It's different when you go to a haunted house by yourself. It's different when you're in the haunted forest by yourself. It's different when you're in a room that's unfamiliar to you by yourself. But there's a whole nother level of confidence when you're in a dark room you're unfamiliar with somebody you know. It's a reason why you call your friends to go to the haunted house with you. It's a reason, let me take it back real quick. This may not be godly for some of you, but it's a reason, ladies, why when you were in the club, you asked your girl to walk to the bathroom with you. There's a difference in walking by yourself and walking with somebody. And here's the reason why we can shout. In the darkest seasons of your life, God is right there beside you. And if you get confidence from somebody walking in a dark room with you that has human qualities, what does it feel like to be connected to somebody that has supernatural power that can walk through the darkest valleys and the shadows of death with you? Sometimes you got to celebrate the simple fact that God, even though I can't feel you right now, even though I don't know you're around right now, one thing is for sure, I'm convinced that the word tells me God will be right there beside me. And y'all know why I can lose my mind and go crazy over this? Because now I don't have to be afraid to step out on vision. Now I don't have to be afraid to chase my dreams. Now I don't have to be afraid to go after what I desire. Why, Cray? Because I know if I fail, God is still right there beside me. If I succeed, God is still right there beside me. As long as God is right there, I ain't never. Number one, David has this confidence because he knows, Maritha, that God is nearby. The second reason that David has this kind of confidence that he can say, even in the darkest seasons of my life, even in the darkest moments, watch this, even walking through the shadows of the valley of death, the reason I don't have to be afraid is because God's protection is guaranteed. Can I help y'all real quick like this thing helped me? He says, even when I walk through the darkest valleys, I'm not afraid because, number one, God is right beside me. And watch this. Secondly, God, because your rod will not only protect me, but comfort me. And here's the celebration for your family. The reason you ain't got to be scared to take a chance, the reason you ain't got to be scared of what the enemy tries to do, the reason you don't have to be scared to step out on your vision, the reason you ain't got to be scared to walk on the water like Peter is because you can be guaranteed that God's protection has protected you and God will comfort you. Here's the problem. So many of us are afraid to fail because Nikki Perry, falling hurts. But what I learned in falling off bicycles in my life, falling off monkey bars, getting hung in 10th grade trying to dunk a basketball against Vidalia and falling on my back, what I learned about falling is every single time I fail, I got right back up. And listen, in those moments, I got back up under my own willpower. But there's spiritual moments in life where you get down and don't feel like you can will yourself back up. But that's the beauty in knowing that God has a rod. And even if God don't stretch his hand, his rod will reach you right where you are. And the rod shall comfort me and the rod shall protect me. God will pull you up out of some stuff. And I think the old saints used to say, he'll pick me up out of the mud and miry clay and place my feet on a rock to say, sometimes you got to trust the rod of God. The rod shall pull me into protection. The rod shall pull me into comfort. Here's what a shepherd does. A shepherd never touches the sheep in a moment of attack. Y'all, if the wolf, Keegan, comes to attack the sheep, the shepherd never runs in with his bare hands. This is why David is so adamant. Think about this. Let me teach you for a moment. Think about this. Why David brags so much to Saul later about killing the bears with his bare hands. Because it was uncommon for a shepherd to touch what was attacking the sheep. So David brags later to Saul, I killed them with my bare hands because that was rare. when the sheep are attacked, the shepherd has a rod. Let me help y'all. This blessed me. Thank you, Holy Spirit. The rod is meant for several things. The rod is also meant to correct the sheep. But the rod has a hook on the opposite end. So the sheep are corrected with the straight end of the rod. Pop, correction. Pop, correction. You ain't been to Bible study? Pop. You ain't been to church in a couple Sundays? Pop. You're not tithing? Pop. You haven't been given? Pop. You walk by the man that's homeless? Pop. You've been cursing? Pop. You've been lying? Pop. You've been having sex outside of marriage? Pop, pop. You've been doing all these? Pop. There is a rod on one end that's straight to bring correction. But then the grace of the shepherd has a curve and a hook on the opposite end. That when the attack came, the shepherd will pull the sheep back with the hook of the rod. Watch this, family. So the shepherd will not correct you with the same side that he protects you with. So I designed my rod to bring correction, but also the opposite end of my rod will bring you back to comfort, and it will bring you back to protection. God is so graceful that God designed to use the same tool to bring us correction, but also to flip it over and bring us back to protection and back to comfort. And you know why you should go crazy right now is because yes, God has been chastising you. Yes, God has been checking you. Yes, God has been putting you in your place. But the same God that chastised you is getting ready to give you comfort and getting ready to give you protection. God is so amazing that God says, I won't correct you with the same end that I'm going to protect you with. Here it is. Number 2, David has confidence, family, because he knows that God's protection and comfort is guaranteed. And third and finally, David can have this confidence that no matter what I walk through, no matter how dark it is, no matter what dark valley, no matter if it is the shadow of the valley of death, no matter what that is, I can have confidence third and finally because God set the table. Okay. Let me break this down and I'm done, I promise. This blessed me because we in the 23rd Psalm have always broken verse 5 off. So we make verse 5, and he'll prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemy. We make it separate. So we will go verse 1, 2, 3, 4 and separate 5. So here's the reality. 5 goes along with 4. So when David says that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. When David says, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I have no fear. He says, first, I have no fear because God is close to me. Secondly, I have no fear because his rod will comfort and protect me. But thirdly, I have no fear because he's already prepared a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Good God. I don't have to be afraid because even when my enemies are in the room, even when the wolf that's here to attack me is in the pasture, even when the enemy is lurking on every area of my life, God has already set the table. So no matter what the enemy does, when the enemy shows up in the room where God has set the table, the only thing your enemy can do is sit down. Good. So I'm not worried about what they got to say. I'm not worried about how they try to attack your character. You can't worry about if they leave you. You can't worry about even if your enemy show up. Stop being afraid when people that talked about you show up in the room. I hope I can shout y'all right here. Confirmation that God has set your table is when your enemies show up. I got to go. And the table has been set because God will prepare a table for me in the presence of the folk that's talking about me, that's trying me, the ones that try to get me fired, the ones that fire me. God has prepared a table. This is why I'm not scared if I don't get the promotion. This is why I'm not scared if I lose the job, because I know when I walk out of here, my table is already prepared, because God has already gave me everything that I need. And family, somebody should lose your mind right now. And this ain't a bone crusher moment, but this is a Jesus moment. I ain't never scared, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like. I ain't never. Everyone standing. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. Family, I don't want anybody in this room to be afraid. You lose the job, you don't get the promotion, don't be scared. God is beside you. God's protection and comfort is guaranteed, and your table has already been set by God. Listen to me. Stop being scared to take the risk and step out on your dream. Why don't you have to be afraid? Because God is beside you. God's protection and comfort is guaranteed. And wherever God is leading you to, the table is already prepared. I'm not afraid to start the family. I know there's been some hiccups before, but I'm going to have this one. I'm not about to sit over here and calculate how much longer I got with my fertile eggs because my age. I ain't scared. Because God did not dictate my production on my age. And the reason I ain't scared and the enemy can't put that in my head, I don't know why I'm saying this, the enemy can't put that in my head, is because I know God is beside me, God's protection and comfort is guaranteed, and the table is already prepared. I ain't scared no more. I ain't never scared. Bone Crusher said when I pull up outside the club. But listen, family, for us, wherever we pull up, we ain't never scared. I want you to grab somebody's hand real quick. I'm done.